in the olden days, traveling from point A to point B was by canoes. And a canoe traveling to another island or to another location, on land there would be spotters on the hill, guards, Nambati, and they'll always scan the horizon, looking for the sail of a canoe in the distance. The reason they had spotters was if a canoe approached from the horizon with the sail still billowing, they will observe very carefully. If the sail is not lowered, that canoe is making a statement. They're coming to declare war. Those on land, they have two options: to go and wage war, or to take the highway and broker peace. If they are to broker peace, a canoe is dispatched from land to go and meet the visiting canoe out beyond the reef. And out beyond the reef, the brokering of peace begins with words called Nailuva ni Tawake, words uttered diplomatically using the high way of respect to ask to disarm them. The words are spoken to the guests, but really they are spoken to the spiritual realm following the guests. If they are coming to wage war, the words spoken are to counter that warring spirit and begin peace. So if brokering is successful, the first tangible sign is the sails are lowered. So that's out at sea. The first high-level diplomacy of peace was done out at sea. And once the sails are lowered, another level of diplomacy was spoken with the whale tooth to ask them, come to the quiet, calm waters. Heave up your anchor and come closer. That ceremony was called Thabui Kelekele, heaving up of the anchor. The heaving up of the anchor was not just, hey, we'll move closer. It showed a level of trust between Party A and Party B. We are now confident we take you in our trust that you will look after us from the visiting point of view. Once they're in the calm waters, then the hosts dive into the ocean and treading water. That's when they hold up the next whale tooth and they welcome them. It's called Ngalongalovi. The Ngalongalovi literally means we are swimming out to you, and imagine the position. The guests are in the canoe and the hosts are in the water and looking up, treading water and asking, come on land, come in peace. We demonstrate, etc., by going in the water, an act of humility. And that moves them, that moves the host. But once that token, that welcome is received, the hosts retreat to land. And as soon as the guests arrive on land, remember they've been traveling overseas, the first ceremony that is done to them is the drying of their tapa, of whatever they're wearing, called the wakamama. They're taken to a building. Mind you, this is before Christianity. They still haven't known each other. But this is diplomacy at its very best. A highway of brokering peace, of appealing to the high levels of humanity, of peace, long before UN came up with the notion of diplomacy, long before foreign diplomacy was invented. This was the way the ancestors saw the sea as a way to broker peace between strangers. Mind you, the intent of the host is still unknown, but it does not diminish the hospitality and the diplomacy from the hosts. The guest's intent is still unknown, but it's not the business of the host to find out why are you here. Our purpose is to welcome you. Our purpose is to embrace you. Our purpose is to build bridges with you. And the first bridge of peace is built out at sea. That was the ethic, out at sea, the ceremony. That's just on the sea, the ceremony. I mentioned the whale tooth. The whale tooth was brought into Fiji by the whalers and earlier by the Tongans. Before the whale tooth, we had our forerunner to the whale tooth, a shell. Well, actually, different types of shell that function as a tambua. The word tambua is an old Fijian word that comprises two words, tambu and a. This old language was spoken about 1,000 years ago, 1,500. Tambu, it means tambu, sacred, but the suffix a meant something that is, or a place that is. So tambua, something that is tambu, naka sa pakatambui. So before the whale tooth, the icon that was consecrated before the whale tooth was a shell called sawanga and another white shell called songoweneni. These are the shell currency that connect us with the Melanesian side of the Pacific. How did the whale tooth come? It's a story of trade. The Tongans, they valued the Samoan mat, the Ietonga. But the Samoans, the color of royalty was red. And the only birds that had red feathers were endemic in Fiji, the kula. So the Tongans, in order to get the Ietonga, they came to Fiji to trade for the red feathers of the kula. And the kula was found in Laucala Island, Taveuni, Lakemba, Matuku, and Kandabo. So where the exchange, the barter for the kula feathers was the whale tooth, because in Tonga, they caught whales. They also decorated on whalebone scrimshaw art. So that was in surplus to them. They brought it over to exchange with the red feathers, and gradually the notion of tambua evolved from the shell to the whale tooth, because we don't hunt whales. So it was a novelty, it was a rarity. When something is rare, it becomes more precious. So the Tongans came for the kula, and in exchange they gave the whale tooth. Ironically, the word for this is kula, but we are now using the wool from New Zealand. But the old word has the memory of what once was kula, wawa kula. The word for red in Tonga is kula kula. And the old word for red in Fiji is kula kula, red, crimson. The sea has provided a lot in terms of sacred icons to the land. The honorific reference to Mbua is the Kaunita Mbua. It's a sunken reef to refer to Mbua, the traditional reference. The traditional reference of the High Chief of Lalangabis is Tidakau, King of the Reef, which shows origins, which shows sense of place. The sea not only provided our ornaments, it also provided our chiefs. And in terms of the mbuli, the white shells, there were the mbuli kula and the mbuli bula. These were the ones that were specifically chosen to give a high level of spirituality. The mbulibula was adorned on the mburikalo from the rooftop, the rafters, right down to the floor. And they tied it and it was decorated. And that set apart the mburikalo as tambu, sacred spiritual site. That same idea was attached to the tanoa. The tanoa arrived into Fiji from Samoa, from the island of Manono, or Lemaki and Lesa, Lemaki Leha, and they found their way to Tonga. And anything in Tonga finds its way to Fiji because of all connections. So from Tonga, it came to Lakemba, and the Tano found its way to Lakemba. Once it was in Lakemba, Lakemba was once a subsidiary of Mbao. So once it arrived in Lakemba, it went to Mbao. There's a memory of that in one of the early Wulibal of Mbao called Tano, to signify the arrival of Tano from Tonga. Again, the sea was a pathway connecting kinship and trade. Trade with the red feathers, kinship trade between the royal households of Malietoa, of the Tonga, and of the Tuilakemba, and then the Tuineo. So that sacredness, to render something sacred, the shells, the mulibula, were adorned to the Tanoa to say this has been made sacred and is set apart. Again, pointing to how the sacredness of land, we take it from, the sea provides the icons, provides the ornament, provides the decoration to elevate the mundane to something sacred and consecrated. The nature of how animals in the sea became sacred is because they were associated with an ancestor. And because ancestors were revered, whatever shape, whether it's a kingfisher or fish or a seabird or shark, whatever shape they chose to shapeshift into, that became the sacred totem. They would not violate, they would not catch it, nor kill it, or let alone eat it. Imagine the sacredness we now render in our churches, at the pulpit, at the altar. That notion of tambu was not brought by the church. It already existed in the indigenous worldview, and it was expressed out at sea or the old sites. This is an old village, Kortambu. These are the new generation living in this village. The respect here is no noise, keep a distance, respect. That's a resting area of those who passed. That sacred notion of tambu, when Christianity came, it was just transplanted into the church. Sadly, we transplanted all, and we uprooted that tambu from the land and the sea and put it in the church. And over time, the sacredness of the church continues to evolve at the expense of the sea and the land. When I say this, it not only underscores that we, as custodians of the land and the sea, we need to reclaim this tambu. Secondly, the church needs to realize this sacredness, it is an indigenous transference of tambu from us, from the land and the sea, to the church. Perhaps the church could help remind us also that the creation of God, long before Christianity, we had also our ancestors had seen it as tambu. And when they say they treated it as tambu, tambu did not mean only prohibition, it also meant consecration. It was consecrated. It was easy for our ancestors, the early ancestors, to receive Christianity because they could take the notion of consecration and give it to a deity they could not see, because they'd been doing it for centuries on land and sea. When we talk about science, for somebody to get a PhD, they study 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. This knowledge is 4 centuries, 5 centuries, 6 centuries. In PhDs, if you study science, you study in a lab. Our ancestors, their lab was the ecosystem. They didn't study for 4 years. They tested everything. The same principles and rigors of PhD, of science. They did it to the environment, but instead of 4 years, 10 years, 4 centuries, 5 centuries, and they passed it on to the younger generation and passed down. It's old. It's old science. It's using the environment, the ecosystem, and observation and testing. All that time to study, to observe, to test, to pass on. And our ancestors were so good at it that the complexity that science sees today, our ancestors, because they've been at it for centuries, they were able to simplify the complex into one idea. One word, behind the word, when you unpack, can you see all the complexities? The notion of totems is our indigenous way of reminding us that we have a responsibility to look after what is around us. The custodianship starts with the house, the kinship. We are responsible for each other. And it extends to, if you are a land person, you are responsible for the land. So that's where we have indigenous totem trees. And there are those whose totems extend to the sea or to the river, to just show that this is part of being responsible, being stewards, look after. The looking after meant not only cleaning, being responsible, they put in place tambu. Totems is tambu. Don't profane, don't abuse. That's our indigenous notion. And they wove stories, because nothing was written, as a way of helping keep it in the memory down the generation. So whether it was a shark or trevally or spinefoot rabbitfish nanunga or a turtle, the stories were woven as a way to keep the memory alive. Keep it in a story because it becomes fascinating and mysterious. If it's just told tambunga, it becomes flat. But pack it into a story, add a chant over it, you have something that is timeless.